Welcome to the Jaco Report. I'm Charles Jaco. Mayors may come and mayors may go, but Darlene Green abides. The Washington University graduate has been one of the most powerful people in city government for almost a quarter century. She was first budget director under Mayor Freeman Bosley Jr. and then became city comptroller in 1995. Through 4 mayoral administrations, she's managed the city's finances, balancing an often shrinking tax base against the needs of a major city. She's maintained the city's high bond rating while being one of the triumvirate that makes up the city's executive branch. Along with the mayor and the president of the Board of Alderman, she sits on the Board of Estimate and Apportionment, E&A. Any major city expenditure has to go before the Board of E&A. Major spending, tax incentives, big projects all have to clear E&A. As a financial watchdog, she also takes political positions, from opposing the proposed privatization of Lambert International Airport to recommending that the city's infamous medium security workhouse jail be shut. We're going to be talking about that and a lot more with our guest today, St. Louis City Comptroller Darlene Green. Ms. Green, thank you very much for coming in. It's a pleasure.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Haven't seen you in a long time. Let's start out with the airport. In your mind, just from a fiscal prudence point of view, why is the idea of privatizing Lambert a bad idea?
It's a bad idea. First of all, it's because the airport is doing very well. It's being managed well, and the growth of the airport since the recession in 2008 has been phenomenal. They have more flights, and one of the best things I can tell you is that the cost of employment has gone way down. So you've got a situation where your revenues are up at the airport and the costs are down. And that's a great formula for any airline that wants to fly out of an airport and have a good cost. And, you know, in our location, we're located very well right here in the Midwest.
On the airport, I've heard that in a lot of cases, the figures just don't add up in terms of privatizing the airport. The idea would be that if you leased out the airport, you get a lump sum of cash up top in exchange for some company running the airport for 30, 40 years, however long it would be. But that the amount of money you might get up front for Lambert just would not cover expenses, because the first thing you'd have to do is pay off $600 million in debt that Lambert owes, which might leave the city with absolutely nothing. I guess my question is, if those figures are so self-evident, where even an English major like me could figure them out, why do you think the drive to privatize Lambert continues when the math just doesn't work?
Well, the math does not work today for the city of St. Louis. It does not work today for the airport. I looked at a possibility of privatization from my position as comptroller in 2009 when we were in the midst of a recession, and no private entities wanted to take that because it wasn't a good deal for anybody private in private business. Today, the businessmen are looking at the airport because the airport is thriving. The revenues are up post-recession, and the cost to run that airport is down. The cost of employments now is very competitive. It has shrunk from the highs that it was in the early 2000s to a very manageable and very competitive cost per employment. So that is a very, very attractive site for those who want to look at taking the airport.
But with all that being obvious, yet the drive to privatize Lambert continues, even though the math doesn't work. What's going on?
It's strictly political favors being running amok, I would just say that. And so when you look at crunch the numbers, and you can see that while the airport is well run, it's not only surviving, it is thriving. And it has a great board of airport commissioners that run that airport, along with an excellent staff that is very well trained. And we can compete with other airports very well, now, and even better.
One of the things I found interesting in the summary of the city's financial state that I read was that you've got a shrinking tax base, you've got expenditures that have to be made, you have to balance all this, and then you went down the list of things that needed to be taken care of. Missing from that was what the police chief and the director of public safety have said. They've said repeatedly, we're 100 to 140 cops short, and we need more people. There was nothing in the fiscal projections about that. Is that just because the city is not in a position now to hire, think about hiring 100 new cops?
Well, when you think about the total budget, the budget for the city is about $1.1 billion. Okay, that's the total budget. Of that total budget, public safety is nearly 60% of that budget. 56% is what that is made up of. So they get the lion's share, the police department, the fire department, everything surrounding public safety. And so the trend really should be looking at how do we police better, and where can we add new cops, and where can we reallocate monies that you're already receiving.
In other words, you're already getting 60% of the budget, that's all you can get.
Well, I mean, when you want to have a budget that's balanced, as well as continue to deliver city services throughout the city, you're talking human services, you're talking healthcare, you're talking about, picking up trash, and you're talking about all the kinds of things that people and taxpayers deserve to demand as taxpayers in their city. So, of course, public safety is one of the most important, but certainly there's a need to look at that budget and see how you can reallocate those dollars in order to add more police and more security for the safety of the citizens.
Speaking of public safety, the medium security jail, the workhouse, has been described as a hellhole by a lot of people, and yet it is still open. We've been talking about closing this thing for the better part of a decade, probably longer. Why is it still open, and do you think it should be shut down? And if it's shut down, what do you do with the prisoners who are there?
Well, it certainly should be shut down. I'll just say that right off the bat. It should be shut down, and the time is now to plan. The city's leadership should be planning for the closure of MSI as soon as possible. Now, you have a facility that housed about 1,100 at one time, and now it's housing under 400. It's right around a 300 number, and that number is continuing to shrink. But the budget itself continues to stay the same. It was $16 million budget when it was housing 1,100. Now it's housing 300. That budget remains at $16 million. So that's what I'm talking about when I talk about reallocate. Let's look at how can we look at what we're doing and do it better.
Is that building there just so far gone that there's nothing to be done with it? I mean, we've heard not only complaints of brutality from in there, but complaints of no air conditioning during blazing hot weather, heating and air conditioning systems barely work, all kinds of shortfalls. Is that building just falling apart, or is it the people who are running the building and the system, in your mind, who are the problem?
It's an old facility that should have been shut down in 1995. As a matter of fact, that was the plan under the Bosley administration, was to shut it down and build the Justice Center in its place. But at that time, and I was the chairman of the Capital Committee at the time as budget director, and I was one of those who served on the committee to talk about how do we answer the federal lawsuit that the city had against it for the city jail that was downtown on 14th Street. And one thing was to build a Justice Center, that then the question was where. And so the Bosley administration delivered that plan to the community and to the judges. The circuit court judges at the time said no. We would like to have a judicial system in the downtown area that included a Justice Center, and that's why we built it, relocating the election board and building the Justice Center in its place. And at the time, that Justice Center was meant to be built for expansion, because we didn't know what the future held, and then the administration changed, and that was not a priority for the next mayor. So we built the Justice Center, and so now I think as we go forward, we need to be looking at what is the next steps for the Justice Center, what is the next steps in terms of closing MSI and managing the dollars for that population, the prison population. There's no way, though, it could be closed immediately. You'd have to have some place to put those folks, correct? We have, and that is correct. We have some beds at the Justice Center. We have the St. Louis County Justice Center and other access to beds for those that we currently have. And I will say that the administration is doing a good job of continuing to reduce those numbers that are being held before trial. So that all of that with the new landscape, that's a good sign that we're closer to closing it than we've ever been.
As the population goes down.
As the population goes down, the sentencing also has changed. You know, sentencing for crimes, there are more gun crimes being sentenced or charged as federal crimes. So that means that that person cannot be housed at a medium security. They need a maximum security, which MSI would not be able to facilitate. So you're looking at a growing population at a justice center or a maximum security facility and not at a minimum security or medium security. So you got to look at that.
You became comptroller 24 years ago. What has changed? What's the thing that's changed the most about the city's fiscal outlook, both in terms of the money coming in and the money going out? Have the sources of it changed? Has development changed anything? Has this changing face of the city changed anything? What have the biggest changes been in terms of what the city spends money on and where the city's money comes from in the 24 years you've been in office?
Well, one of the things I will say is that is a good thing in terms of the revenues, where the money's coming from. There was a larger amount of sales tax revenues. Sales tax trumped the property tax, but now property tax revenue has grown. That's a good thing. Mm-hmm. So that is coming from some stabilizing some of the neighborhoods and the amount of economic development and that kind of thing. So that's a good thing. Over the years, we've seen a small tick up the property tax. Earnings tax, payroll tax continue to grow steadily, slow but steady. And overall, the budget grows slow but steady. And what we're spending our money on, I would say, is public safety. That was just at under half the budget. Now it's over half. You know, it's nearly 60% of the budget, as I stated. So as that number grows, we have to look at areas where we need to reallocate within the public safety so that we can manage the safety of our citizens a lot better.
It's interesting to me that even though the overall population of the city continues to shrink, that property taxes are going up because of demographic changes taking place in the city. According to the Census Bureau, a lot of lower income, they happen to be African American, the lower income folks are moving out of the city, and a good number of single college educated people, they happen to be white, are moving in with higher incomes. Does that slow but steady shift mean anything to your office in terms of potentially more income coming into the city, property values, earnings taxes, that sort of thing?
We have seen the tick up for payroll tax revenue as well as earning tax revenue, and that is a good indicator that the salaries have changed. They have risen throughout the city. What it means is that we continue to have to look at growth in its new environment. You know, how do we meet the challenges of the changing neighborhoods? And I think that's a good thing when you talk about the quote-unquote divide of the city, the north of Delmar, for example. There is growth there, and it's slow but steady. And anything that is slow but steady is a good thing.
You anticipated my next question, which would be with the NGA, the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, property going on almost 100 acres in North St. Louis. Do you think economic development can move outward from that, or do you think that's just going to be a one-off project where the feds have this land and it's there and not much else may be developed around it?
If we can avoid the politics, if we can move the politics aside, then it's inevitable that there will be growth there. That's an excellent site. The universities are involved. St. Louis University, Washington University is involved in what the needs for training the individuals that will be working at that site. And so the population of the city, as it continues to change, will continue to be such that it can fill in the gaps in those neighborhoods that have long been vacant. And a lot of that was from political reasons.
Yeah, I was going to ask, how could politics interfere and foul up the idea of the NGA leading to economic growth in the north side? What could happen?
Well, there's a long list of those developers that are interested in the sites that are very close and nearby that development, which makes sense. And so politics would muck it up if they want to reduce the number who can go in. But if they open it up and make it a very honest, competitive process, we'll see lots of development going into that area of mixed use development, as well as people who want to go in and sincerely build up on the neighborhoods. There's the old North St. Louis neighborhood that is a very strong neighborhood, and there are opportunities right there to grow that all the way over to that site because it abuts it right now. So it's a lot of good opportunity, but the politics would slow it down, and that would be a shame for the city of St. Louis.
Let me double back on the politics end of that to the Board of E&A meeting on refinancing bonds for the airport. You had come up with this deal where refinancing these bonds would save the city, how much was it?
$20 million.
Well,
it was $20 million.
Just $20 million flat.
Right out the gate, $20 million. This was a planned financing. This was no secret to anyone, including the mayor and the president of the board. And I'll tell you, this planned financing was agreed to with the airlines in 2015.
And you bring this up at the first board meeting in March, I believe, and no vote was taken. It seemed like, from their point of view, both the mayor and the president of the Board of Alderman seemed to be, or claimed they were blindsided by it. I mean,
total politics.
You smell a rat someplace. What is it?
Well, Louis Reed, as an airport commissioner at the time in 2016, and I'm an airport commissioner in 2016, as well as Lyda Crewson, airport commissioner. We're all three airport commissioners. When the airport presented their plan, their 5-year strategic plan, which included this financing. So it was no secret. Louis Reed actually made the motion to approve it as an airport commissioner in 2015. Lyda Crewson was the chairman of the Transportation Committee for the Board of Alderman. She carried the legislation which included the approval of the financing. So then to actually do the financing, which is bringing a separate piece of legislation that now carries forward what you've already approved 4 years ago. I was stunned that they would claim that they did not know anything about it.
And this last Tuesday it was brought up again and it passed. But here's my question. Do you think that the drive to privatize the airport had anything to do with this?
It absolutely had
what way?
everything, because they have obviously been tied to whatever promises made to deliver whatever they promised to deliver. And I think that's, sad that instead of delivering on behalf of good, honest government, you're choosing to deliver to special interests. And so what does that say to the people who have elected you, that you would openly, when the records speak for itself, as you should have had knowledge of?
So you're saying that the mayor and the president of the Board of Alderman are so committed to the idea of privatization, or in the pockets of Rex Singfield, who wants the airport privatized, that they were willing to torpedo a bond refinancing?
It appeared that way to me, and that's what stunned me. It appeared that way. The mayor went away, the president of the board went away. They asked many questions, and every question that they asked was geared to how could the operator receive the airport at a reduced rate.
So you think the fix is in the rest of City Hall in terms of pushing for privatizing the airport?
What I can say is that the political maneuvers continue.
Got a final question for you. We talked about how things have changed in the city and, with income and outgo over the last quarter of a century. Right now, in your mind, what is the biggest financial challenge the city of St. Louis faces? Is it the shrinking population? Is it the tax base that is kind of stagnant? I mean, what one thing concerns you the most about the city's financial situation?
I think that in most cities we're talking about its infrastructure, rebuilding some of the bridges. Over the Forest Park Parkway, we've got about 2 or 3 bridges that really need some attention, and that's just one area where bridges are. We need to be looking at infrastructure in our city, just like in all the cities across the country.
I noticed in your report
So
you said the average age of the average firehouse in the city is 87 years, the
Yes.
average age.
Yes, and so infrastructure, I'd say, is right up there, along with our public safety. That continues to be a challenge as to how to do it well, whether we have enough cameras, whether we have enough police, or whether we have enough of all kinds of things in that public safety area.
City Comptroller Darlene Green, thank you very much
You're
for coming
so
in.
welcome.
It was
Thank
my
you
pleasure.
for inviting me.
Our thanks to Darlene Green, and our thanks to you for joining us here. We hope you can join us back here next week for another edition of the Jaco Report.